breakfast right here on Capital FM, fresh heat station for Ugandan out. In the studio, we have two beautiful guests.
I haven't been called beautiful in a long time.
I don't think it's the other way around. Well, today in the studio, today in the studio, we are talking the UK-Uganda relationship. What are the opportunities? What are some of the projects the UK is doing in Uganda? And what is it like to live or work in the UK? Well, I'm co-hosting this segment with a very unusual guest, the UK High Commissioner of Uganda. Yeah, you have it right. Her Excellency Lisa Chesney. And of course, together, we'll be talking to a not so new voice to this radio station, Alan Kasuja. I know I had to love
Hello.
There you go. Who's done it all in Uganda, yes. And now he lives and works in London with the BBC. Alan and Lisa, welcome to Capital FM.
Thank you so
much.
Well, Lisa, I'll give you all the pleasure to introduce Alan.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Alan, for the really, really warm welcome. This is actually, I think it's my first time in a radio station.
Really?
Radio station.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm still just about 4 months in or so. Before I introduce our fantasy guest here, I think I have to say thank you so much to Uganda for the warm welcome, because I've been made to feel incredibly at home. But
That's
my first
nice.
time in a radio station, and there's no person, I'm told, better to have my radio station experience with than Alan Kasuja.
I don't know about that.
No, listen, I said to him, tell us a bit about Alan, and he just says, I'm just a guy. But my team say no. My team say a legend of broadcasting.
True.
Not just Capital FM, but the whole Ugandan broadcasting scene as well. And listen, I'm going to embarrass him even slightly more. Before I was coming out to Uganda, I was researching Uganda, listening to the media, really vibrant media scene. I was listening to a broadcast, actually, that Alan had done, and my mum came into the kitchen. I think you were interviewing President Museveni. It was one of your older broadcasts. And she's like, oh, what an amazing voice. Who is that man?
I was going to say, what's her phone number? But maybe not.
Well, I was impressed too, but I think I'm absolutely delighted then to have Alan as a guest. One of the most familiar voices on the UK airwaves and the Ugandan airwaves
Thank you.
well.
Thank you. Very kind of you to say that.
So Alan...
So am I supposed to just sit back as you ask the questions?
Well, I think you said you don't like being asked the questions. And actually, do you know, I'm always usually being asked the questions, so I am loving every minute of this.
Okay.
But we're going to flip it today.
Sure.
We're going to flip it today. So you are our interviewee. We're flipping the script. We want to hear your story, because you are a bridge, really, between the UK and Uganda.
Do you think?
In lots of ways. I think so, most definitely.
Yeah. In what sense do you think? Well, I shouldn't be asking questions, but why not?
Well, why don't we start with your story, and then we'll take it from there. So I think one of the things I'd like to do, or start off with, is right back to when you were a child. So let's take you back to when your family was here. And I understand that your family actually had to leave Uganda during Idi Amin's regime. And I'd love to hear a bit more about your early years. You're in Kenya as a refugee. How did that shape Alan of the future?
Wow, that's a whole book in itself. But the kids these days call us the Amin era kids. You know, the kids born in the 70s whose parents had to flee because Uganda was becoming much more difficult. And so I was one of those who fled to Kenya. I lived there for 12 years. And I think that presented me with a bit of an identity crisis. I wasn't sure whether I was Ugandan or Kenyan. I spoke their languages. I ate their food. I knew their stories. I knew their mythology, but I was still Ugandan. And I don't think I was ever accepted as Kenyan, which is why Uganda is particularly special, because you come back home and you finally settle down to an identity that you can own and run with. And that's why for me, I've been around the world, been across the continent, reported from over 40 African countries, been to all sorts of countries around the world, lived in the UK, but I'd still live in Uganda. So I went to school in Kenya, primary school, then crossed back into Uganda for secondary school. That's just broad strokes. How did it shape me? It made me more interested in people because of the different influences. I'm more tolerant and more understanding of people because I can get into their, different facets and sort of immerse myself in their idiosyncrasies and just try to understand who they are as people. And that comes from a multicultural exposure, if there is such a phrase, where you speak Luo, you speak Luya, you understand Kikuyu, Swahili, and a multitude of other languages, and you can connect at different levels. And I think that has played into my professional career as well. You know, to the Kikuyu, I'm a Kikuyu, to the Luo, I'm a Luo, to the Muganda, I'm a Muganda, to the Mswahili, I'm a Mswahili. And that also means that I speak or understand probably 40 languages. So that's been the impact. That's been the impact.
So you look at the human really rather than the national identity then for you, looking at the person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is key. You know, some of my best friends, the friendships that I form are not based on where people come from. They're based on who they are as individuals. And very often I don't even know where their villages are until there's a family emergency and we need to rush to the village, or there's a celebration. And that's partly because we connect at a different level.
And do you think that's something that's uniquely Ugandan? Because one of the things that strikes me is the approach that Uganda takes to refugees. And I've worked in many, many parts of the world. I haven't seen anything like it. There is something uniquely special about the Ugandan welcome to everybody.
It helps that we have been refugees before. You know, we've all had to leave the country. It helps that President Museveni had to run away for his life. That his children, General Muhoozi was born outside Uganda. His family had to seek refuge. It helps that the same can be said of Ruhakana Rugunda, the former Prime Minister, can be said of Mama Mbabazi, the former Prime Minister. So I think a lot of that is doctrinal and ideological, but there is also just the fact that Ugandans are warm people. We're just the best human beings. Honestly, we really are just good people.
Yeah.
You know,
I can agree with that.
You can land at Entebbe International Airport without any idea where you're going to stay. And the taxi driver will take you to his house.
Or this I love. This is, so I found a couple of times when I've got lost. I was up in Jinja, I was in Kumi district. If you ask someone, you say, I'm lost, I don't know where to go, not only do they tell you, but they actually take you out of their way to their next destination. How amazing is that?
It's a very, that is what is Ugandan.
Ugandan, isn't it?
Uganda might not have the best infrastructure, it might not have the best buildings in the world, but it has good people.
Sure.
That is the distinguishing factor. And a lot of people have told me when they came to Uganda, they healed. They felt better about themselves. You know, there's an expatriate who once told me that he used to earn about 10 grand a month. But whenever he went out with his team, with his staff members, who might have been on about 1,000 or certainly a fraction of what he earned, they bought all the drinks, you know, because that's the Ugandan way. That's the Ugandan way.
I love the Ugandan way. So we're building up a picture already, I think, of what it is to be Ugandan, and through you, Alan. And I think that welcoming approach, that ability to look at the human, not just the identity, I think is something that really comes across very strongly, certainly to me as a new arrival. I'd love to hear how that shaped your interest in storytelling.
I think everything is a story. Everything is a story. You're a story.
We're all a story.
Uganda is a story. Kampala is a story. Everything is a story waiting to be told. And we'll never run out of stories to tell. So I guess it's a survival thing that drove me into storytelling. But then also just being able to plant a microphone in front of someone and have an immediate impact. You know, like Oscar, the guy that I met at Chitante Hill School, which is not too far from here, fell completely in love with this young man who lived in an urban settlement. I hate the word slum. And he showed up every day in a very dignified manner, polished shoes, ironed shirts, until he took me to his house and I saw the shack he lived in with his older sister, who was heavily depressed. And, you know, well, long story short, we managed to get him a scholarship. After telling his story, he went to the US on a 4-year scholarship, and voila, he graduated valedictorian, best student in his year. So for me, that is what I live for. I live for telling stories that are impactful. You know, we have an opportunity here in Uganda, for example, to mold this country into what we'd like it to be. And at the crux of it is storytelling. The ability to tell the story of this country would be transformative. So I live by that, and I believe in it strongly. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm much better at asking questions than answering them.
Well, I think I'll end with a professional can do some in there. So
I'm also very curious to know journalism and storytelling. Now that you're talking about storytelling, What motivated you to do the shifting from studying law at Makerere University and then, embarking on a career in media? Like, can you share some of the most memorable moments from your time hosting the Big Breakfast here at Capital?
I used to set the questions. What's the question now? What is it? It's what? I used to set those questions, and I said the most difficult brain game questions.
Oh.
Yeah. I used to set them there.
So,
but also, I worked with a talented group of people. We used to just show up every morning and hang out and have a laugh. Me, Jackie, Ramesh. And that was it. We got into a bit of trouble because of the things we said on air. But Uganda, you might not, you get away with it. Who's going to arrest you? Nobody's going to show up and arrest you. They're busy trying to survive. So by and large, I think for me, memorable moments, I miss the Big Breakfast. I really do. And that's partly because of the impact it had when we did it. We talked about issues that affected people on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We got big shots in here and grilled them. And Ramesh always asked them the most ridiculous questions. And somehow
He does, does he?
Yeah, he still does. He's still naughty.
Yeah, very.
I miss that. I miss my team. I miss the freedom I had when I was working on the Big Breakfast. So there's so much to miss and so many memories. One of them was Jackie's birthday, and Jackie and I had just had a fight, I think.
Oh.
When you spend so much time together, you're bound to sort of rub each other the wrong way. And it was her birthday, and we didn't say anything, and she was such a bad mood. And what Ramesh and I had done, we talked to someone, and we just decided to surprise her completely with a full birthday thing on here.
Oh.
So we've created lasting relationships as a result of that. Gosh, I've never talked this much.
Well, curious to know again the challenges and opportunities when you join BBC World Service in
Do you know what the
2012.
BBC is? Do you know what it is? It's
Huge.
You come from Capital FM to go to BBC.
It's a big deal.
I don't know how I survived, man. I think it's partly because of Kampala. Kampala prepares you for the world. Honestly, sorry, what was your question?
So I'm asking the challenges that you faced when you joined them.
I was presenting Newsday, the biggest breakfast show in the world.
And the impact, of course, it had on your career.
Yeah, the biggest breakfast show in the world. With the best journalists you can ever find anywhere in the world. Most experienced presenters you'll ever find. Guys I've been listening to all my life. And here it was, man. You get a lot of imposter syndrome. And you're like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? I missed my 91.3 Capital FM.
Can you imagine?
Where you got away with saying rubbish.
Here,
the rules are very clear. I was just lucky to be with the best of the best. Nuala McGovern, Julian Keane, the best. May Julian's soul rest in peace, but best of the best who are willing to share their experience, their knowledge, and to impart it in you. And I think the most important thing I did when I moved from here, where I was a very big fish, highest paid presenter in the country, biggest breakfast show in the country, I humbled myself and decided to learn from these people who were very, very good at what they did. They were the best in the world. And that is how I survived. But also, you must understand, this city, Kampala, I keep saying, is the only place where you leave home with no money in your pocket and come back drunk. So
How do you manage that?
Kampala is a way of life.
Yes,
it instills in you a fighting spirit that you won't find in many places.
True. True.
You go to the boarding schools I went to. Have you been to a boarding school in
Not
Uganda?
yet, no, I haven't.
I should take
This is
you.
an experience.
Oh my God, it is.
Survival. You're taught how to survive in ways. You go. Can I be a bit gross? Do I have your permission?
Go on, go for it.
You go use the bathroom. Ivan, are they called bathrooms?
Toilets.
Ivan is sitting over there. You go use
I'm wondering where this conversation
No,
is
I know, but
what's going on.
But you see, all that it is, basically, Uganda prepares you for anything in the world. The cumulative lived experience here just prepares you for anything.
Okay.
You've got the fighting and the welcoming side then. So you get ready for the fighting in your boarding school, but it is still the most welcoming country.
And I think we all recognize each other's individual struggles. We're willing to put up a fight against things we don't believe in, things that work against us. But also, we're willing to put up a fight to survive as Ugandans. And that spirit is one that lives on
Alan, I would love to know how many more African voices can be heard on a global stage?
In what sense?
Like getting to the point where you got the level.
I think we have a historic obligation to tell our own stories.
Okay.
We can't rely on international media houses, on the BBC, on CNN, and the rest of them. We can't do that anymore. Africans need to project their voices and to be heard.
Okay.
How many more voices? All the 1.7 billion of them need to be heard. And I think that for me is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing, projecting those voices, because it's important that people hear what Africans have to say, that we take our rightful place on the global stage.
All right.
Yeah, so there is room for every single African voice, and when we are heard, then our agency, when we trigger our agency, we shall see the world reorganize itself in a manner that suits us. But until then, we shall continue to be subjected to the whims of governments that are not our own. This is not direct attack to you, Your Excellency.
I think it's a really important discussion, isn't it? The world order is changing, actually, and it has to.
Yeah.
It no longer matches the reality.
True.
And I think journalism has got such a critical role, exactly as you said, Ellen, just like putting a multiplicity of voices on the world stage, and you've really done that, I think, not just for Uganda, obviously, but for Africa. Daily broadcast every single day, or Daily Africa. That piece that starts, certainly my day.
I'm glad it does. I'm glad it does.
Mums now as well. Especially you have your voice. That's it. You've got a couple of fans.
Please pass on my best.
I will do.
Yeah.
I will do. And I think actually that's it. We come back to some sort of key themes. The world order is changing around us, isn't it? I love the fact that the UK works very closely with Uganda in the UN. That's an area that needs reform. There needs to be more African voice.
Yeah.
It needs to be through every single dimension of life.
I think for me the priority areas, if you asked me, based on my work as a journalist and all the conversations I've had, because I moderate high-level conversations around the world, I think that key areas are around, of course, the United Nations reform, where you have no African countries on the Security Council, but then also just the financial architecture. The institutions of the world, are they going to continue being perceived or being used as instruments of advancing Western agenda, or are they going to actually reorganize themselves in a manner that allows African countries to participate more effectively? These are the conversations that need to be had very urgently.
And this is why we need sort of quality journalism and actually people telling the stories from different...
I agree. I hope I'm an interesting interview.
Of course.
I'm sure you are for all the listeners. But actually the other piece I think to me that's really interesting about you is it's really telling the UK-Uganda story from a very blended perspective.
Yeah.
You live in London now.
Yeah, I do.
Even though the weather probably really depresses you.
No, it doesn't do. It stresses me. Kampala and Bond City, Muna Kampala struggles with that winter.
But you don't miss the Buddhas, no?
No, you see, but the chaos. No, the chaos is all part of the color. It's all part of the beauty of this city. I appreciate borders. I struggle to deal with them. I worry about them, but it's all part of what Kampala is. Hopefully we shall get reorganized, but it's what it is. It's what we have at the moment. Have you been on one?
No, unfortunately. I just watched it go around me. I have fallen in love with matoke.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Stop eating it because I find after about 4 weeks I bust out of all of my sweets.
Really?
So I actually had to revise that.
Yeah.
So yes, exactly. I've learned that every Ugandan meeting has to have cake involved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We show up to eat for these meetings. Whatever you talk about is up to you, but we want tea. We want tea and peanuts and cake.
Sorry, and that's totally fair enough. So I'm gradually, I'm learning over time.
Yeah.
But I learned one of the things that I love, and perhaps you can illuminate this for me, Alan. I find so many connections between the UK and Uganda, almost every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes people stop me and they tell me that they studied in Birmingham or their families there or businesses. And you to me are a great example of that.
And I think that's been a long-standing relationship. I'm going to sound like a politician here. There's no running away from the fact that there's a historical relationship between the two countries. It goes back, I say historic, it goes back a long way. Lots of people I know have gone to school in the UK. I have had the benefit of going to school in the UK as well and working there. So yeah, by all means. And now almost everybody has a UK football team.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
You should come up with a visa for football team.
Shall I guess what your team is? Because so far everybody is either Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United.
Liverpool has always been the family football team, but Arsenal, man, it's a very abusive relationship. But you hang in there.
You're still hanging in.
It's so difficult.
Yes.
It's so difficult being in a relationship with someone you commit everything to and they don't reciprocate.
One day, Alan, one day it's going to happen.
Yeah, but yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that special relationship continues. It's I don't know if I should call it a special relationship. Makes me sound like an American. But I think a lot of Ugandans would like to go to the UK and experience it and just bust that bubble or just experience it and come back.
Yeah, there's good and bad in everything, isn't there? How has living in the UK for a period influenced your perspective on global affairs?
Interesting. I think first of all, it's access to people, access to information. Living in London means you have a lot of access to scholars, to just a bunch of brainy people who know a lot of things about things. So you have that access. But also living in London and working at the BBC opens you to so many resources that you won't have being in Uganda, and that has been very helpful. And I think, which is why I encourage people to if for nothing else than to go study in the UK and experience that. A friend of mine brought his class to the BBC for me to speak to. I'm not sure I was very helpful, or not sure they picked up anything. Just realized how many people were in that room, how many people it brought together. And even working at the BBC, when I want to find out what's going on in Ukraine, I'm going to talk to someone who has been doing that story for 40 years. So they know what they're talking about. And the colleagues that I've been working with have covered a lot of global affairs and global for the last so many decades. So I have access to that, and that's very helpful.
And I love the fact that, so we often talk about the history, and of course the history is part of it, but for me the thing that I think is very special about the UK-Uganda relationship is just that it's very current as well. So you talked, for example, about education. One of the things that I love about this job is meeting our Chevening scholars and our Commonwealth scholars.
Yeah.
There's about 2,000 odd Chevening scholars that have gone to the UK, and actually their classmates learn from them and then come back with.
And I think for a lot of these guys, it's a very big experience. I met one at the airport and they'd never been outside Uganda, so they were at Heathrow and they were a bit lost, and I helped them find their way to wherever they were going.
You could get lost. It's such a big airport.
All the way through Ugandan style.
No. I was British at that point. I was being very London. You see, get in there and buy. You see, good luck. Let me know if you get there or don't. But again, that relationship. I'm hoping that it can be a relationship of equals.
Exactly.
And we're speaking at a time when USAID and all this. I don't know if I'll cause you diplomatic problems, but at a time when the Trump administration has taken decisions about aid that would benefit a lot of people, and my biggest concern right now is, are we going to see a growth in drug-resistant tuberculosis and HIV because of an administrative decision taken elsewhere? And I think that is the one thing, that perception that if you're going to contribute to Uganda, just let's do it in a manner that gives Ugandans dignity, but also that's almost authentic, that is genuine.
As a diplomat, a sign to me of a strong relationship is actually where you do have points where you disagree, but you can still talk about them.
And work them out. Yeah, like get visas easily. How's that going, by the way?
Oh boy,
I will always try on that.
like make it easier for Ugandans to go to the UK. And
Alan.
It is noted. And I agree with it. Really tough.
Because you see, I'll just say this, and I'm glad we're having an honest conversation about this. Ugandans who want to go to the UK to watch football matches are unlikely to want to live there. They'll want to come back home, I think, because by and large, the Uganda of the 90s was a much more difficult one, and the Uganda we see now is one where people are happy to be here. They thrive, and they want to stay here, and hopefully that is going to be recognized, and it will be that much easier for Uganda, for this relationship. What is a relationship if I can't visit your home? and if I can't have food at your house?
Home, and I promise you a cake when you do.
Exactly. If Ugandans, if Brits can come to Uganda and land at Tebe and pick up the visa on their way in.
It's a tough thing.
Why is it tough though? I think if we are to talk about a relationship at all, it just helps. The very first visa I got to the UK, oh gosh, I could tell that story, but let's just say
This is maybe one to do over tea.
I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and went and queued up during El Nino when it was very wet. And for 3 days I waited, and at the time, and I'm sure things have changed now, the most senior person I spoke to was a watchman. Because we were all turned away at the gate after 3 days. Until I decided to kick up a storm and say, hold on. So I went to the High Commissioner's office and they were gracious. And the next day I was seen quite quickly because I was going as a student. And the conversation with the visa officer ended up being about cricket. And so yeah, to that extent, I think the point I'm making is there are human faces behind these decisions, and a lot of them can be very interesting, and that interaction can be great. But I just on behalf of Ugandans, I just hope that a Ugandan can go to Manchester and watch a football match at his favorite team. That is my prayer for the multitudes of Ugandans who live in this country. And I strongly propose that you write to them and whoever makes those decisions and says, let's give them a football visa, because there is such a thing.
I noticed that he said he wasn't pushing for people to go and see Arsenal, so it feels like you're giving up on us.
I'm supposed to be impartial in all my decisions.
I think that point about, that we want the links to be as strong as possible, and I'm glad that they are so strong. So not just achieving of the Commonwealth scholars, but it's got to be mutual. There's got to be a mutually beneficial relationship. And one of the things that I've picked up in my short time here is how many connections there are.
There are many.
UK learn from each other. So I was up in Mbarara last week, met the very dynamic Mbarara University of Science and Technology. They've got connections to London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, University of Liverpool, issues connected to HIV, tuberculosis, and all these partnerships and these research partnerships. People are learning from each other.
Just to give you another idea, Mengo Hospital, Sir Albert Cook set that up in 1887, all the wards, Annie Walker, Margaret Bond, these are British names. These are British nurses who came to the UK. My mother, before she went to the UK to train as a nurse at Alderhay and various other hospitals, worked there and benefited from that. And this is in the 50s and 60s. So there is history, and it's legitimate, and it's real history.
Well, looking at things that we could be rich about, and something that we constantly talk about today, everyone's talking about, is climate. You spoke about El Nino like way back when you had to get your British passport. I'm just curious, Alan, how do you speak about it with your audience, and what does Uganda need to? How does Uganda speak?
Well, that's a complex PhD thesis kind of question. This is why I don't like interviews. But I think also, Ugandans need to be able to tell their own reality, because I want to hear from a farmer somewhere about how their lives has changed since this whole climate conversation can get lost in big picture stuff, and yet the reality is the farmer who used to do 50 bags of maize now does only 20, because there have been changes in weather patterns and things like that. And that for me is where the real crux is. Get away from this high level stuff and go down to the basics, to the person who's trying to survive, and go down to them and try to understand how their life has been impacted. And then you also recognize that it's multifaceted. The climate story includes health, includes women, includes and by and large, if you know anything about Africa, you know that Africa is anchored by its women. So the women are most likely to be affected by the changes in the climate. So it's complex, it's nuanced, and it just starts from people talking about the changes they see from their lived realities.
Well, last year the UK government in particular decided to partner with Uganda Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, launched about £5 million clean cooking program to support clean energy initiatives in Uganda. Now, do you think a shift from charcoal and firewood to clean cooking solutions would be...
I have no idea. I don't know. I honestly do not know. I don't know if that is the change that we need. And I don't know what the intention was with the but I think the UK will never fix Uganda's problems.
It has to be us.
It has to be us. We can't. It's great that you have friends who can give you 2,000 here, 1 million there, 3,000 there. But unless that goes towards you building your own ability to manage your own
issues,
business, and I think this is the key thing, Great to have partners, great to have these partnerships, but if the end game isn't to make sure that we do not become dependent, and we saw this during the COVID-19 crisis, and we saw this again now. I keep talking about TB and HIV resistance that could result from the decisions that have been taken by the Trump administration. Unless we we move away from that level of dependency, we should be able to tell that we need these trees. Nobody needs to come and tell us that we need to cook, to find better methods of cooking. We need to be taught how to fish. Not given fish all the time.
Ugandans definitely know how to fish. I have so much lovely tilapia.
Have you tried them, Porter?
No, I haven't.
I don't like it.
Why?
I've got a pro and a con here.
Now patch, I would never recommend it. But tilapia, safe. That's a safe option. Yeah.
It sort of takes us on to, we're talking about business, aren't we?
Yeah.
Investment, and I think that to me,
that is transformative. Bring it. Bring British. Yeah, bring them in.
They're here.
Are they? We need to see all of them. We need to see more of them. It's great to know that they're here.
Come and talk to our very vibrant British Chamber of Commerce.
And you know what is really great is if they come in and they bring real investment, real money, and not people who show up and posture and look for photo ops and influence peddling pictures with the president and
Show me the money.
yeah, exactly. Just bring in the money, invest here, and let Ugandans benefit, because there was a time when I woke up, I just thought to myself, Uganda wakes up in the morning to find which part of the foot to shoot, because this happens quite a lot. Uganda can be so self-sabotaging sometimes. I love my country. That's why I can be so honest. That's why I can be so honest about these things. But you see the opportunities. You see, again, when you're in Uganda, you're across the region. You're across different parts of of Africa. You're across Africa with a free trade agreement. So and Uganda provides a very good landing spot for a lot of businesses. I've seen people from the UK come here on some sort of adventure. They come in as backpackers and they end up living here forever. Because they came up with this business idea that has just meant that they won't go back to the UK. A lot of diplomats that I know have decided to settle here because they found a home here. By and large, I think the best option would be for people to come and experience Uganda first. Come and see it, come and get to know it, understand it, and then make that decision. And I think, in my view, a lot of people who have been trying to find places to go to in the region have found that Uganda offers them the incentives they need. And God knows I should send someone a bill for saying this because someone is benefiting from me promoting Uganda so much. But Uganda is actually a great place for businesses of any kind, because however much progress we've made, it's still virgin territory, and there's still a lot that can be done in the tourism sector and all sorts of. And because we have a critical mass of young people who are brilliant and who are looking for opportunities, again, Uganda is offering everything: brilliance, opportunities, potential for growth. It's all here.
And the talent here is immense. We took some young entrepreneurs. It's their ideas, their businesses, but they've got really climate smart ideas, and we've been trying to support them. They've got all the ideas, match them up with some mentoring and some investment. Some of them came to London recently to meet sort of investors. There is so much talent in this country.
But
I think things get in the way. We have to be really candid, and I think the more focus there can be collectively to make it as attractive an environment as possible, to nix corruption, those are things that make it.
Corruption is everywhere.
Corruption is everywhere, isn't it? It's in all countries.
In Uganda, we have pickpockets, but in other parts of the world where there's more money, it's much bigger scale, and it's daylight robbery.
Think about the long term. Think about the long term.
Yeah.
So.
But you're right. I agree. Hopefully. We can because we have a responsibility as Ugandans and as Uganda to make sure that we are attractive. We are not entitled to people's resources. We must create an environment that makes it, because it's a competitive world. Everybody wants investors.
It is a competitive world. I mean, we sort of want growth, and you've always said this, to be as inclusive as possible.
Absolutely.
That's the way to make sure really good growth takes everybody with you, not just a few.
Interesting.
Well, Alan, what are your future aspirations as far as African journalism and upcoming themes?
I don't know if I want to be a journalist for much longer, to be honest. But I think what I want to do for the rest of my life is to train Africans to tell their story.
Okay.
I think that is what I want to do more than anything else. I just want to see hundreds of thousands of Africans, Ugandans, just talking about their lived reality, so that we platform that and we can actually amplify these voices. Because, right now we're just not doing enough. We're not hearing enough African voices. There are amazing young people doing amazing things.
Fully agree.
There's a bunch of guys I met not too far from here at a restaurant, and I just got talking to them. And these 3 young people developed some software that trades for them using blockchain, and they make $5,000 every day. These are Ugandan kids. So there is a lot of talent like that, and these stories are never heard. So if you amplify these stories, amplify these voices, I think that will have a far-reaching impact.
Are there specific stories that you feel are not told and they need to be told?
The story of the African woman is one that hasn't been told properly.
Yeah.
With what's happening in the DRC Congo, it's the African woman.
Sad. Yeah.
With what's happening, with climate change, it's the African woman. And for me, I've been to places like Shinyalu, where I met this woman whose husband was a border man, and this woman was holding the family together. She borrowed land from her mother-in-law so she could plant and make sure the granary was full, that the plate had food, the kids went to school. And I've been to Lagos, where I met this woman with a Down syndrome child who was lost and didn't know what to do. She needed all the help she could get, and we finally managed to support her by telling her story. Again, when these stories are told consistently and amplified, that would be transformative, because you take care of the African woman, you're taking care of this continent.
You're making me think about how we can as well use our platforms to amplify, because there are so many powerful, strong, capable women dealing with incredibly difficult circumstances.
Absolutely.
All role modelling phenomenal success. So
It's true.
you planted a thought.
And I think, I'm sure you have a very clear job description, but if you were to just get involved with these Ugandan women, you'll be amazed at who you'll find. And I'm sure you know this. You'll find the most brilliant, the most patient. These women, when you graduation day, you just see how many boys go to the markets to pay tribute to their mothers who have toiled in those market stalls just so their kids can be educated. It's down to the women. We guys think we are constantly looking for the next big deal. The woman is just making sure that we are anchored. We have a home to come back to, and we have that our children are educated and they're vaccinated and they are well taken care of when they are well. So imagine how transformative it would be if their agency was properly unleashed.
Yeah.
Well, I love that's a brilliant aspiration, is that women as the backbone of the country. I'm glad that Alan realised he's outnumbered today. So this is clearly a he for she. Now, I've got one last question, which is taking us right back to the UK-Uganda relationship, and you are our bridge, and you've experienced it from both sides. You're not allowed to answer visas on this, but what are your hopes from where you sit for the UK-Uganda relationship in the next decade?
I hope it's one that will grow into there'll be a bit of growth in mutual trust. I'm hoping that the UK will work hard to make sure that it's not perceived as having imperialistic intentions, that it's actually a real partner in development, a real partner in growth, because by and large that relationship is viewed as suspicious. A lot of people benefit from it, obviously, and the UK has done a lot, obviously, but there's also a need for Ugandans to begin to trust that this is a relationship that will benefit them, that it's not rules and it's not my way or the highway. It's one where we sit down around a table as friends, break bread, have a conversation, and find things that will be mutually beneficial. One where we can actually be real friends. That's what I'm hoping for. One where I will not feel like I'm coming to you for a favor. I'm going to my friend to see my friend and to sit down and to see how to best solve our challenges. Yeah. And I'm hoping that can evolve. That's how the relationship can evolve.
So I'm taking away building mutual trust, growth at the heart of it, mutual benefit.
Yeah, like you and I.
And a
You
real
know,
friendship.
did you just say I could come over for a cup of
I
tea?
did say you can come over for a cup of tea.
Yes.
Exactly, come over for a cup of tea.
Exactly.
And let's talk real stuff.
Yes.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
Even
what
stuff
we're
we
hoping
disagree
for.
on, we can do
Yeah,
that.
and then I can take you out to some of my joints in Kampala.
I'd love that. I would
Kafunda.
absolutely love that. I'm in. Not on a boda.
No.
I'm in.
Thankfully, I do have a car, so we can sit down and have a drink in one of these places.
Right, you heard it
That's the
here
sort of
first.
relationship we're all looking
Exactly.
for as Uganda and the UK. Not one where you're told to sit down there, wait,
Follow.
You know, no.
No, I'm in.
Good.
Right.
Well,
We'll shake hands on this.
It's been lovely having you two in the studio. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Alan.
Yeah.
Well, we'll continue with the drink
Was it an
breakfast.
interesting interview or was it just boring?
Are you kidding me?
Give marks out of 10, Alan.
3, I'll take that.
No.
I think we'll give him at least a 7. So yeah, maybe
Excellent,
higher.
thank you.
No, I think it will be a 9 out of 10.
Thank you
It
very
was
much.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Diplomat,
Yeah, thank you.
We'll continue with more hits right here on the Freshie Station. We're going to Capital.
This is Capital FM. Capital FM. Capital FM.